Okay, so we're going to look at negative exponents and the quotient property. There's a lot of review in this lesson, plus a few new things. So we're going to start by looking at the quotient property. We talked about it a little bit already. Basically, when you have these fractions, the numbers in front, which are called coefficients, get reduced like a normal fraction. So what can I divide 10 and 15 by? 5. So divide by 5, I get 2. Divide by 5, I get 3. And then the powers, this m down here is the first power. You actually are going to subtract those. 4 minus 1. And so you have 2/3, and you have m to the 4 minus 1, which would be 3. And you could write it 2/3 m to the 3rd, but it's a little awkward. So what they usually will do is pretend, there's a little 1 under that, and just put it together. 2m to the 3rd over 1 like that. So we also talked about a little bit this week, if there's 4 of them on the top and 1 on the bottom, you're basically just canceling 1 from the top and the bottom to get 3. Oh, I forgot this is a 3. I wrote a 1. Hang on. That's still 2/3. But the m to the 3rd you can just stick in the top. Okay, so backing up, we had 2/3 when we reduced 10/15. 4 minus 1 is 3. M to the 3rd.
So you just put a 1 up there.
So I put a 1 in the bottom, multiplied that. 2 times m to the 3rd is 2m to the 3rd in the top. 3 times 1 is 3. I just wrote a 1, and that probably threw us off.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so let's look at the next one. Let's reduce 6 over 8. What are we going to get? 6 over 8. What do I divide by? 2. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So you could think of this as 3/4. And then on the x, I'm going to take 3 minus negative 4. You're subtracting because that's the rule for the quotient property. But there's also a negative there. So I have to remember to keep change, which basically means this is going to become plus. And you get 3/4 x to the 7th. However, they never write it that way. They just stick that x to the 7th in the top because it has a positive power.
Do we have to write it like the top way?
You can just go straight to this if you want to. This is what I want. What's in the box is what I want.
Okay.
This is not incorrect, but for some of the stuff you're going to do later, it'll be awkward.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and just aim for this. If when I subtract I get a negative, then it flips to the bottom and you take the negative off. So when we're done, there'll be no negative powers. So the main rule I want you to get here on these with the powers is we're subtracting, which we looked at a little bit already, but it's just kind of coming together with lots of things. And so we come over here and it's like, gosh, there's lots of letters, but just take it one piece at a time. So start with just the 5 over 15. What can I do with that? Divide it by 5, right? So I can make it 1 and 3. Good. Then I'm going to look at the a. So I can just write this out as I go. 1 over 3. I'm going to have a, and I have negative 5. Actually, on this, I'm going to show you guys a trick. This is not how I want to do this, because with all the subtraction, it's going to take forever. The negatives we looked at in the last lesson, flip them. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this a to the negative 5th and flip it down here. We're going to take the b to the negative 6 and put it up there, because the negative is the ticket to cross that fraction bar. And then let's just rewrite what we have. So I'm going to go ahead and keep the 1 and the 3. And now what was left on the top was b to the squared and c to the 3rd. But now I also flipped this b to the negative 6 up there, which is going to make b to the 6. So this went up there. On the bottom I have a 3. I still have an a to the 3rd. I still have a c. But I also flipped this a to the negative 5th down there and got a to the 5th. And now everything has positive powers and I can just put stuff together. So you should never have a letter more than once because there's ways to combine them. So when I have b squared and b to the 6th, this is all being multiplied here. We add the powers. So I'm going to get b to the 8th, c to the 3rd. And if you want to have that 1 out in front, you can. And then what will I get if I put the a to the 3rd and a to the 5th together? It's adding. 3 plus 5, 8.
It's 8, yeah.
Okay, and then the C goes on the end. And if you're like, how do I know what order to put them in? Just alphabetize them. So now I look. Do I have any letters in there more than once?
C.
Yes, the C is in there more than once. And so when I'm combining those, I'm going to go ahead and subtract. So this is C to the first, that's C to the third. 3 minus 1 is 2. It's positive 2, so I'm going to stick it in the top. So I've got 1, B to the 8th, C squared over 3A to the 8th. No C's. So when you get done, there's 1A, 1B, 1C in the whole thing. If they're on the same side of the fraction bar, you're adding. If they're on top and bottom, you subtract. It does take a little bit of work. These are a little bit involved. But if you know how to do it now, it's going to help you with stuff later, especially in science class when you have giant fractions and formulas that have all kinds of things. So it's better if we do it now. Okay, so 3 and 27, what can those divide by? 3. We get 1. What's 27 divided by 3?
8.
Close.
7.
Wrong other way.
9.
9. There we go. All right, so what I'm going to tell you to do, let's flip everything that has a negative power. So this a to the negative 2 is going to come down here. If you want to rewrite it, a to the squared down here, if that helps you, let's do that. And then this a to the negative 4th and y to the negative 2nd are both going to go up. So I'm going to put an a to the 4th y squared up there. So hopefully that makes sense. And then we can rewrite the whole thing, which I'm going to do down here. So I have 1 on the top, 9 on the bottom. This y to the 5th was already up there. But now I also have an a to the 4th and a y squared, and we'll combine things in a minute. The 9's down here. I already had an a squared down there. Actually, and we moved everything else, so that's it. So now we just have to combine things so that there's only one of each letter. We're simplifying this. Basically, we're taking something complicated and reducing it down to something more manageable, because if this were an application, you'd have to do more stuff with this. This would be like a first step. So on the top, I have y to the 5th and y squared. What am I going to do with those powers? Add them. So I'm going to have y to the 7th. And then the 9's down here. And then I have a to the 4th on the top and a squared on the bottom.
You have 8.
So you're going to have a squared. 4 minus 2 is 2. I'll have a squared on the top. And so now this is it. On my answer keys, it's probably going to say a squared y to the 7th over 9. Because the computer alphabetizes them. And it usually doesn't do the 1. But this is okay. I will tell you the reason I grade a lot of these myself is there may be a million different ways to write the same thing correctly. What we don't want is any negative powers. We don't want any letters showing up more than once. We're going to reduce this down, shrink it as much as possible. Basically, this is reducing fractions high school edition. I know.
I have more clear on this book.
Good to know. All right, so let's go down here. We've got some that don't have any numbers. Still going to work kind of the same. So what do you see that we can do on number 3?
You don't have to do anything. You don't have to like divide or anything. No, there's a negative.
There is a negative.
Oh.
So I've got to get that out. The negatives have got to go. So I still have x to the 5th. I've got y to the 6th. And I have x in the bottom. I'm still not done. There's still something there that I don't want. I don't want to have x's in 2 places. There should only be one x in the whole thing when we get done. So what do we do with the x's?
It's x4, y 6,
Yep, it's x to the 4th, because this would be x to the 1st. So 5 minus 1 is 4. I'm just going to get x to the 4th, y to the 6th. And you could put it over 1 if you really want to, but really this is it. If it makes you feel better to still have a fraction on the end, you can, but this is what is going to be on the answer keys. Anything over 1, you can get rid of it. If the 1's in the top, you have to keep it. In the bottom, you do not. Okay, so let's look at the next one. It's basically, I just think of this as a game. Think of it as a game that somebody made you play. So take care of your negative powers first. So this n to the negative 1, move it down here and make it an n to the 1st. This p to the negative 2, move it up here, make it p squared. And then wherever they were before, get rid of it. Except that looks funny. So then we'll just rewrite what we have. So m squared, there was already a p there, and then we put a p squared up there also. Down here I have an m, there is an n to the third, and we moved another n down there. So everything's positive now, which is one of the rules. We don't want negative exponents. We just have to put everything together. So what do you want to put together first? The p's. So if I have p and p squared, what's the power going to be? P to the third. Okay, what else? What can we do? The m's. I have m squared on the top and an m on the bottom. What do I do with those powers? Since it's top and bottom, we're not going to add. We're going to subtract. So 2 minus 1 is 1. Will that m go on the top of the fraction or the bottom? The top, because there were more m's on the top than the bottom. Okay, so now the n's. I have n to the third and n to the first. So what's n to the fourth? Good. So now there's no negatives. I only have one m, one n, and one p in the problem. So just take it in baby steps. Start with moving around those negatives. Rewrite it so that you have a clear picture of what's there. A lot of people try to do this without rewriting. Sometimes they're successful. If they just have it over here, it's really easy to leave something else. So rewrite it. And then just remember when you're checking my answer key, they're always alphabetized. Okay, so a couple more of these, and then I'm going to add a little bit to it. I know you're excited. So on this one, what could I do first on number 5?
Divide.
So divide the 3 and the 12 by 3. I think that's what you meant. So we're reducing that fraction, so 1/4. So I know over here I'm going to have 1 and 4. Then what should I do next? Move the negatives around. So a to the negative 2 is going to come down here. B to the negative 4th is going to go up there. So let's just look at what we have. So on the top, I already had, actually, let me write that to the side. So I'm going to move that b squared up here, write it b squared. A squared will come down here. So when it jumps over the bar, it loses the negative sign. Then I'll rewrite it. So now I've got 1. I already had b to the third and c, but now I also have a b squared that we moved from the bottom.
I thought it was before.
It is b to the 4th. My bad. I wrote it wrong. Here and here. Good job paying attention. Here's a 4. And we had an a and we had a c, and then we've now added an a squared. So now we just got to put the a's and the b's and the c's together. So something I want you to notice, there's c to the first and c to the first. 1 minus 1 is 0. That basically just cancels out. It's gone. So that's kind of easy. It's nice to have something easy, right?
Yeah.
And so then on the top I can put the b's together. So b to the 7th, good. So we added 3 and 4. And then 4. Yeah. So I have a times a squared, so a to the third. Just remember, if there's just something like this, it has a first power. And you can leave the 1 off of it if you want to and just make it b to the 7th. Either way is okay. Alrighty, so there's one more. I'm going to save that for a practice problem, I think. So let's go ahead and go down. So this will be practice.
I understand this more because I'm actually writing it down.
Writing it down definitely helps. Alright, so on number 7, we have this multiplication problem. So here's what's going to happen. When you multiply two fractions, you basically just multiply across the top and across the bottom. And so to start with, we're just going to rewrite it with everything that's there. So 5, x to the negative 2, y to the third, 3x, times 3x. It's all together. And then on the bottom, you're going to have y to the negative 2 times 10, x to the negative third, y to the negative fourth. So I really haven't done anything except basically, you can just kind of think of it as connecting this bar across that times sign. Because when you multiply fractions, you just multiply across. So everything that's on the top will just go together. Everything that's on the bottom goes together. So if you have regular numbers like this 5 and this 3, we can go ahead and multiply those together and get 15. And then there's lots of x's in this problem. I have x to the negative 2, y to the third, and there's another x. So I just put this 5 and 3 together. That's all I've done. In the bottom, there's just a 10 with nothing else. But I want to put those numbers, those coefficients, in the front just so they're kind of out of the way. And then I have y to the negative 2, x to the negative third, and y to the negative fourth. So fun times. What I would do with this is get rid of the negatives first. Even though you've got multiple x's on the top, multiple y's on the bottom, the negatives make our brains go crazy. So let's just move a bunch of stuff. So this is going to go to the bottom and become an x squared. And then all of this is going to go to the top. And so now the top has a y squared, x to the third, y to the fourth it didn't have. And then rewrite whatever you've got. So the 15 and the 10 are still just where they were. They're just hanging out. We'll reduce those in a little bit. And now on the top, I've got y cubed, y squared, and y to the fourth. Huh? So y cubed was already there. I added a y squared and a y to the fourth. Let's just go ahead and add those. 3 plus 2 is 5, plus 4 is 9. So y to the ninth. So I've done all the y's. And then there's an x and an x cubed. So let's make that x to the fourth. And then in the bottom, I just have the 10 and then the x squared that we moved from the top. So we just did a bunch of cleaning up. And at this point, we can go ahead and reduce that 15 and 10. It is improper. We're going to leave it improper, but we will divide it by 5. So I will get 3 and 2. So on my final answer, there will be a 3 and a 2. Go ahead and get those on there. And then I can leave the y to the ninth there. I have x to the fourth on the top and x squared on the bottom. So what happens with that? Huh? Subtract. So 4 minus 2 is 2, and it goes on the top because there are more on the top than the bottom. And then that's pretty much it. On my answer key, it would have x squared and then y to the ninth because the computer alphabetizes, but it really doesn't matter. It's no hard and fast rule that you have to do that. Okay, so it's a lot of work, but I think if you just keep track of reducing the fractions, flip the negatives, add things that are on the same side, subtract things that are on different sides of the fraction bar. It's doable. You just have to be patient and go through the steps. They could also have things where you have powers on the outside. We looked at this with multiplying before. We hadn't looked at power of the quotient property before. So we'll just look at it. Basically, it works the same way as we'd had it before. So if there's a square out here and this is all in parentheses, you square everything. So 3 squared is 3 times 3, which is 9. And then x to the first squared is just squared. And then we're going to square the 5. So 5 times 5 is 25. And we just look to make sure there's nothing to reduce. And there's not. 9 and 25 don't reduce. There's only one x in the problem. It's all good. On number 2, before I squared everything, you can do it a couple of ways. We can square everything and then take care of the negative, or we can take care of the negative and then square. What do you guys want to do first?
I'm squaring first.
Squaring first, we can do it. So what is 7 squared?
49.
49. And then I multiply the powers. So negative 2 times 2 makes a to the negative fourth. B to the fourth squared would be b to the eighth. 4 times 2 is 8. And then on the bottom, I have 3 squared, so 3 times 3 is 9.
49 and 9
Nope. 49 is 7 times 7. That's the only thing that goes in it besides 49. And 9 is just 3 times 3. So they just stay. And then all you have to do on the end is move that a to the negative fourth to the bottom and make it positive. So I'm going to have 9a to the positive fourth when we're done. Make sense? Mm-hmm. So you could move the a to the negative 2 down and make it a squared and then square it, or you can square it first and then move it. As long as you do both, it doesn't matter what order you do it in. It's up to you. So there's one more problem. We put it on a different page. And it has some interesting things going on. There's a negative on the outside. We have a couple of choices. We can distribute that negative to everything that's inside, which is going to make most of it negative. We're going to have to flip most of it. Or there's another trick that I want to show you. Trick. Remember when we first talked about negative powers, if it was a fraction, the negative would make it flip. So you can flip this, and I'm not changing anything on the inside. I'm just flipping it, and that will make this negative 2 power on the outside a positive 2. And then you can square it and take care of that negative 3 on the end. But it just, you can flip the fraction and make that positive, so that's a cool trick. So I have 9 b to the negative 6, 2 squared is 4, and then a squared. So the only thing left would be to move this down, and you'd be done. So 9 over 4a squared b to the 6th. So just remember that negative powers flip. If it's on the outside of the fraction, sometimes it's advantageous to use this and flip. Sometimes it's advantageous to go ahead and distribute it first. It depends on what you've got going on the inside. Okay. So this next one is interesting. I do have this multiplication going on, but I have to do these powers that are on the outside first. Sometimes they'll have parentheses and there's no powers. If there are no powers, we would just multiply across and put everything together. But because there's powers, I have to take care of those first. So one thing that we could do, we could flip both of these to take care of the negative on the outside. Let's just go ahead and do that since we just talked about it. So I'm not changing anything on the inside yet. I'm just flipping it and making that negative 3 into a positive 3. And I'm flipping this, trying to not mess up anything that I write because it's a lot, and make that to the positive 4. And I'm kind of writing bigs, but there's all this space that we can use outside the box, so I feel like it's okay. All right, so then you can raise everything to the power, or we can flip negatives first. Do you just want to do the power and then flip? Yeah, we can do that. So remember to multiply the power on the inside with the power on the outside. So negative 3 times 3 is how much? Negative 9, be brave. And then I have 3 to the 3rd, which is 3 times 3 times 3. So 3 times 3 is 9, times another 3 is 27. Negative 4 times 3 is negative 12. 2 times 3 is 6. And then we come over here and we're going to raise everything to the 4th power. So 2 to the 4th is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. 16, good. I'll have x to the negative 8th. Y to the negative 24th, because we're multiplying those powers. On the bottom, I have 3 to the 4th. No, because you got to take 3 times 3, which is 9, and then 9 times 9 is 81. And then x to the 20th. Your brain has to switch back and forth. I'm doing regular powers on the numbers, and then I'm multiplying those, and it just gets to be a lot. But just take one step at a time. Don't try to do too many things at once. Okay, so now basically what I can do is just connect this across. Don't bother even rewriting it. It's just now one giant fraction, because when you multiply fractions, that's what you do. You multiply across. And then we can just put things together. So there's this nice times sign here. But when you multiply fractions, you put the tops together and the bottoms together. So just think of it as one giant fraction. So on the top, I just have 16 as a coefficient for the big numbers. And then I'm going to go alphabetical. I'll go x to the negative 8. And then these y's I can put together. Negative 9 and negative 23 make negative 33, if I did that right. I think so. And then on the bottom, I do have to take the 27 times the 81. Not going to lie, I don't know what that is. So I'm going to use my calculator really quick. 27 times 81 is 2,187. And just a quick tip, If these numbers up here weren't reducing before, they're not going to reduce after. This is all 2s and that's all 3s. They're not going to reduce. So I don't have to worry too much about this and this. And then I'm going to go alphabetical, so I'll do x's and then y. So I have negative 12 and 20 for the x. So if I add negative 12 and 20, what is my power?
32. No, positive 8.
Positive 8, because it's basically just 20 minus 12. It's hard to keep track of all those rules and integers and everything. You can double check it with your calculator. And then I have y to the 6th. We're getting so much closer. Look how much smaller this is, even though I wrote it bigger. We don't have nearly as much here as we did up here. We could subtract them, or do you want to just move the negatives around? And then you can add them, which I think is going to be easier. So let's move these down here, which means I'm going to have an x to the 8th and y to the 33rd on the bottom. So there's really not a lot left on the top. It's 16, 2187 on the bottom. And now I have x to the 8th times x to the 8th, which makes 8 plus 8 is 16. And then y to the 6th and the 33rd makes y to the 39th. It took me way too long to add that together. And now the numbers don't reduce anymore. All the x's are together. There's only one x and one y, which is what we want.